All right, Nick, welcome to the podcast, man.
Appreciate it.
All
Thanks for having
right.
me.
Hey, I don't know. Did we meet in Miami or anything? Were
I
you
think
in
it's
Miami?
possible that we did. I was in
Yeah.
Miami. It was a whirlwind of meeting people for like 2 hours nonstop, but it's a ton of
Yeah, at
fun, but
the little,
hard to
I
keep
can't
everyone
remember
straight.
that little gathering, the first historic meetup, so to speak. I
Yeah.
actually, just by chance, had a pretty good conversation with ASG there.
Oh,
That was
excellent.
cool. And, you go to these sort of gatherings, you just kind of meet who you meet. And I looked at some footage afterwards, that I filmed, and I saw people's name tags, and and I remember seeing them at the event, but you just don't get a chance to talk to them. And I was amazed at the amount of people and the amount of, what I call BitClout OGs, so to speak. People that I had known a little bit about before, and then even subsequently have been very present on the platform, even this many months later. So it was a pretty cool gathering. So we may have shook hands or looked at each other or something, who knows? But yeah, that was cool. So what do you do, man? Like I think you're in San Francisco, right?
I grew up in the Bay Area. I live in DC right now. So since the pandemic, I've been bouncing around a lot, but I get back to the Bay Area, a decent amount in California. I used to live in LA. I spent a little bit of time in New York, like right before COVID got crazy. I
Yeah,
guess already a year and a half ago now. But now I live in DC with my girlfriend, so I'm here most of the
cool.
time.
So you're all over.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
Yeah.
holding the fort down across the board. But yeah. So my background, I studied creative writing in college, and love fiction, love writing, love storytelling. But I've done a bunch of different stuff. Like straight out of school, instead of trying to teach English or something like that, I went and kind of did like more of the traditional management consultant route for a little bit,
Hmm.
which allowed me to bone up on some business skills and make more money than I would have otherwise trying to be like a writer back then. And I did some more traditional finance at one point in my career. And oh, I might have.
Yeah, no,
Got a
you
little,
didn't lose
oh,
me. I just put
okay,
you on
nice.
screen. That happens every time that I do that. Somebody looks like, "Hey, where'd you go, man?" So,
Yeah. But my first job out of college, actually, before I did any of like the consulting and finance, like traditional stuff that folks do out of school, is I actually worked at Snapchat for a while, and that was like my intro into digital media. And I was working on the Snapchat Stories product at the time, which was a nice combination of like using my storyteller's brain and skill set to shape a product. And so now I feel like, and I've had other jobs in media since, now I feel like coming back to this evolution of Web3 and things like BitClout, I can combine my writing skills as well as my experience in digital media in a really interesting way, as well as some of the stuff I learned along the way, like thinking, kind of putting a traditional finance hat on. So I've done a ton of different things in my career, but I feel like finally they're all coalescing into a useful combination skill set that lends itself well to where we are in 2021.
and so you're completely freelance now. You're not on board with anybody, any company or anything.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I left the last company I was working at back in June, a company called Aussie Media. Lots of really good folks there, but it's definitely more of like a more traditional Web2 approach to media, articles, video, that kind of thing. And I was working more on the business operations side, helping with sales, helping with finance. So it was a great gig for a couple of years, but I'm just so excited about everything that's happening in crypto and Web3 and like the evolution of the creator economy that I figured I need to be full time on the front line, so to speak, of all these different things that are happening.
So are you writing, obviously the work you do with Bits Today, that's time consuming, but probably I imagine you're doing other work too. Are you just freelance writing for people or?
Yeah, no, I Bits Today is definitely a solid chunk of my weekly writing. I'd say that's probably about half of the writing work that I do in any given week. A lot of time is also spent just on BitClout curating and looking for the most pertinent and important content. So staying on top of what's happening, that takes time. That takes a decent amount of surfing. There's a bunch of good nodes that I'm constantly cycling through to make sure that I'm like also seeing stuff from people that I'm not just the people that I'm following. Um, but yeah, my one other project is a project called Keep Cool, which is really more about climate tech. And it's exciting in that there's also a lot of overlap increasingly between like blockchain technology and climate tech, but that endeavor services more of like my desire to have like an impact on kind of the earth and preserving it, preserving our home on the planet for the future generations. So I'm like 50-50 pure crypto and climate. Those are the two areas that I'm spending a ton of time. And so what Keep Cool looks like is I write articles about technologies and kind of entire sectors of the industry, but then I also do really deep dives on companies that are at the forefront of different climate technology products. So a recent example was we did a really long deep dive with a company called Nori, which is a carbon removal marketplace that they actually built on Ethereum. So that was a cool kind of overlap between my interest in crypto and climate. But then
so how does that tie into blockchain? Like carbon?
Yeah. So the interesting thing there is like carbon removal marketplaces traditionally have had suffered from a really big double counting problem. So someone would say, like we sequestered this carbon on this farm in Indiana. I'll sell you the credits for that. They might go sell it to a buyer in Germany. And then the buyer in Germany would say, okay, cool. We bought this carbon credit once. Like we can, like no one's really, I mean, they might not have done it maliciously at first, but they might say like, okay, no one's really like preventing us from selling it again. And then the next buyer would sell it again and the next buyer would sell it again. So the same, if you sequestered 10 tons of carbon at the original site, you've sold that carbon credit 5 or 6 times. People think that they've like removed 50 or 60 tons of carbon from the atmosphere when in reality, you've only removed 10 at the original site. So by building that on a ledger, one of the things that people are most excited about blockchains or originally were most excited about when it came to blockchain technology was just that it is a really great accounting system that solves double counting issues really easily. So building a carbon marketplace on top of a blockchain is exciting for that reason.
Could that be an NFT?
It already is, actually. They use NFTs on Ethereum to store and verify. I'm probably not using exactly the right words, but Nori does use NFTs on Ethereum as part of their process to make sure that like when you buy carbon removals from a farmer, for instance, like they're actually retired and verified somewhere and that you can go look it up. So that was a super interesting piece to write about. And
is there a secondary market somehow?
Yeah. So
like for good,
you're asking all the right questions. It's awesome. They are also planning to launch a actual token that will create a more liquid secondary market to like allow for proper price discovery. So that hasn't launched yet, but they will, like, they're in the process of also trying to do that in a crypto native fashion, which is super exciting. It'll be called the Nori token. There's lots more information on their website.
Because that whole carbon credit thing, that's on some exchange in Chicago, right?
I'm not exactly sure. I think, Nori's building their own marketplace, but there are probably already exchanges.
Yeah, I've always understood it's this one exchange in Chicago where you go file your, I don't know how many credits you have, or if you want to sell them. Like, for instance, me and my brothers and sisters have a piece of land that was handed to us that has a lot of, it's only like 40 acres.
Nice.
And I've always thought, we just enjoy it, but I always thought, well, it'd be nice to get a little bit of something to underwrite costs and things. Why can't I just get carbon credits for this acreage? Because that's really, we don't intend to tear all the trees, cut all the trees down or anything.
Right.
And so I'm wondering how easy that might be to tokenize in the future.
Yeah, I think, A, you all might have an opportunity to do it yourself. And then B, I think the beauty of what Nori is doing is and it might not just be Nori, there might be a bunch of other marketplaces that do well, but like as these marketplaces mature, they're gonna, ideally there'll be a lot of demand from people that want to buy from them. And that will kind of encourage the supply side to mature. And also it'll make it ideally easier for people to provide supply. So like once you have a lot of demand percolating on the demand side of the marketplace, like they're going to have to find a lot of supply just to meet that demand. So it should ideally get easier and easier for folks like yourself to provide, provided that you're maintaining the land in the right way, and then it meets a
Yeah.
bunch of different verification standards, it should become easier to provide and sell carbon removals or carbon credits into those marketplaces, or at least it'll be a lot more streamlined.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your take on, yeah, so I've been involved with crypto for several years and doing stories, and I've interviewed some pretty high profile people actually from Bitcoin and the like.
I bet.
And a few times I've had people that shockingly would say, hey, look, blockchain doesn't help any, they're basically saying the future is not blockchain. And I'm like, what? Your whole thing's about Bitcoin. And they're like, they just take that approach of a database can do this.
Sure.
To what degree have you witnessed that in the climate world, to where you could say, why do we need blockchain for this?
Yeah, I think the climate world is early in adopting blockchain. So there aren't as many instances of companies building something on the blockchain just to take advantage of the hype cycle. Like, I think you've seen that a lot in finance, is like there have been plenty of cases, or there are plenty of cases where you probably didn't absolutely need a blockchain, but it's just like so in vogue that people want to have that calling card. I think climate is still really early in like seeing the applications of blockchain. So there aren't that many examples of companies that are using them. And I think when companies are, like in the case of Nori, they serve an actual purpose, like as we talked about with the double counting issue. So
yeah,
I think so far, just from what I've seen, and I'm pretty early in my own journey about learning more about climate tech, just to be clear, I'm not an expert by any means, but the use cases I've seen have been pretty reasonable and like have taken advantage of the benefits of blockchain, as opposed to just like slapping one on a project to be able to say that, hey, we're using the blockchain.
So we'll try to segue to BitClout here.
Yeah, for sure.
A real blockchain, but looking at two things, obviously the whole news around Bitcoin and the carbon footprint it presents,
right,
and the argument that surrounds it. And then, we have a similar thing with BitClout, which the core dev team decided months ago to say, oh, we're not going to do that. We're not going to mine, after they had just, allowed people to mine it on a proof of work chain. And
right,
I'm on, my take has been, I really believe that Bitcoin could actually be a great thing for the environment.
Right.
Because I feel like it accelerates improvements in technology and sustainability. So yeah, it creates pain along the way, but I think because of the economic incentive of Bitcoin and its sort of exponential growth, we could see in the coming years where people are in a frenzy to improve the sustainability in order to get more Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. Look, I'll start by saying that you're right. There's a non-negligible carbon footprint from Bitcoin mining at Current. That's totally apparent. But, I think it speaks more to the grid as a whole and like global energy consumption than it does to Bitcoin itself. Like if we were already in a world where 100% of our grid were powered by renewables, then this wouldn't be a problem. But since especially places that traditionally have mined a lot of Bitcoin, like China or other parts of that part of the world, still use a lot of fossil fuels in their energy, in the grid and in energy production, like that's what makes Bitcoin a non-negligible emitter of greenhouse gases. But I agree with your point that people's interest in Bitcoin and people's interest in mining Bitcoin also goes hand in hand with people developing more sustainable solutions to mine it and for energy in general. There's a company that I've been talking with recently and interviewing for Keep Cool called Crusoe Energy, and they do something really innovative where they partner with oil and gas sites in the U.S. that flare off gas from their production. And for people that aren't familiar, like flaring is literally just burning gas that is otherwise like bad for the equipment in oil and gas sites. And there's, you're just wasting gas and emitting carbon and methane into the atmosphere, but there's nothing else for those companies or for those sites to traditionally do with that gas. They have to get rid of it somehow. So Crusoe partners with sites like that, and they actually capture the gas and convert it into energy and use it for Bitcoin mining. So you're taking gases that would have been burnt off into the atmosphere and would have been adding carbon to the atmosphere, and instead you're harnessing that stranded energy and using it in a productive way. So Bitcoin in that instance, it's just a really easy application for a company to come and say, hey, you know, there's this stranded energy here that someone should be taking advantage of. What's like the fastest path for us to monetize this once we've captured that energy? You know, Bitcoin mining is one good way to do it, especially with the recent kind of exodus of mining from China that made the economics a lot better for them. So I totally agree with your point. Like there's already specific examples of companies that are innovating and kind of finding new ways to harness stranded energy, and Bitcoin mining is helping them monetize that.
Yeah. How did you get, two questions. How did you get involved with BitClout? And then the next extension is how the Bits Today thing came about.
Yeah. BitClout was really just like an organic random discovery. I was lying on the floor looking at my phone one Friday night. This was still like during the kind of tail end of the pandemic, and back in early April, and someone on Twitter had just posted about it. So, you know, I follow a decent amount of people that are at least crypto curious on Twitter, and someone had posted about it. So I just navigated over and was like, oh shit, this is kind of cool. Like they're going to give me $5 free, whatever, of clout, BitClout currency. So I just started messing around. I think I made the poor decision to buy Naval and Elon Musk coin before I bought some of my own, like a lot of us did, but I had no idea what was going on. And then I just, you know, I was at the time, I was starting to do a little more creative writing again and a little more fiction writing again, which is something that I've always loved, but don't always have time for. So I figured, you know, why not just make this, like no one knows me here. Like on Twitter, I'm always kind of nervous to post my own. There's like people that I've known since high school or even middle school who follow me there. So I'm like not as readily down to post my like personal fiction writing there just because I'm kind of embarrassed sometimes. But on BitClout, I was like, okay, no one knows me here. This can just be a creative outlet for my art and for me to interact with other people and just see what happens. So I spent about a week just like posting random stuff, and I got a little bit of traction. But especially because I was posting some of my own writing or other writing that I liked, I met ASG over the platform, and he, I guess, had just kind of like recognized and noticed that I was into writing and that was kind of my thing. So probably fast forward another week, Andy Arts originally put out a call one Friday and said, this was probably like exactly 2 weeks from when I joined the platform, and said, hey, we really need like a daily recap of like everything that happened on the platform this day. Cause like, I love it here, but you know, I've got a busy day job and a newborn child and all that, and I'm moving. I can't hang out for 12 hours on BitClout and keep up with everything that's happening. So ASG quickly took up the call and started putting something like that together. But then he also DM'd me at first just saying like, hey, can you help us edit this? I know, like, I've seen that you like to write and do all that type of stuff on BitClout. And it actually took me like 2 or 3 hours to respond just because I wasn't checking my messages. And as we all know, messages are still kind of buggy at times. So it's a good thing I saw it when I did, because they probably would have published it without me. But I was able to. It was a Friday and I'd already finished my work for the day. So I was like, all right, fuck it. I'll jump in and see what I can do and spice this up a little bit. So that's how I originally got into the Bits Today fold. And it's been pretty consistent team since then. It was a team of 4 guys, me, ASG, Drip Cult, and a guy named Nathan Maton on the first issue. And Nathan isn't spending as much time on BitClout anymore, but the rest of the team is stuck around. So it's a good thing that I checked my DMs that Friday and got in on that first issue, because it hasn't been much turnover since.
Right. And I got to give you guys credit. I mean, you guys are very prolific, and it's time consuming just to read your stuff. Literally before this episode, I was like, I need to just catch up on what's been going on with BitClout. So you guys are my first source. And so I read like the past 2 or 3 issues, from the past few days. And I was trying to work back to your big special edition, which is the reason I was glad to, happy to get you on the podcast. An hour later, I'm like, I'm still not through all these things, you know. And this is like, this has taken me an hour to read 3 of these emails and, you know, absorb them and look around. And it's like, that's a lot of effort to create that. You know, it's one thing to read it, but to create it, that's an awful lot of output. And you guys keep doing it, you know, and I know that I have other things going on. It's no secret. I have another business and I kind of have to come in and out of BitClout. And sometimes my passion wanes for it.
Right.
Because you're tired. There's a somewhat of an ebb and flow of the platform and the enthusiasm surrounding it. So what has been how do you guys stay engaged and thrilled by it enough to keep doing this?
Yeah. No, first of all, I'll say that length is probably, I think sometimes it's good to go really deep, but I mean, I'm just a lover of complexity and long form stuff. So I'm totally cognizant that we could probably rein it in once in a while. And
oh no, don't get me wrong. I'm glad you guys are, you know, verbose, but I'm just impressed.
Yeah, I am. It's totally true what you say about ebb and flow. Like there have been months even where we probably published a little less. The issues got a little shorter just because there wasn't as much happening. Like, you know, it's hard to be 100% gung ho 24/7. Like there's plenty of days where I wake up and I'm like, you know, I'd rather just go walk outside for 3 hours than sit down and write. But the thing that I have found to be true about writing bits today that is not true about a lot of other things that I've tried to tackle in my life is that once I get in the right mindset on any given day and I get writing, like it all just kind of flows out of me. And I think part of that is doing a good job with just like staying on top of content and curating content. Like once you've identified like, okay, here's like 10 posts from different people from the past few days that are about important issues and lay things out pretty well. Like that already gives you the framework of how to write the issue, or it kind of starts percolating in my mind. But at the same time, like if I didn't find BitClout so interesting and if I wasn't so passionate about it and if I didn't find it so fun, then at some point there's no way I would have been able to keep writing about it the way that we have. So it's a combination of really having been deep in it for 4 or 5 months now and having a keen eye for, okay, like this is, you know, something that's actually reasonably important out of all the different stuff that's being posted over the past 24 hours, but also just having a great time and really feeling like you're a member of a community makes it a ton easier.
Yeah, well, I'm just impressed. And admittedly, you know, and I try to, every time I reference what you guys have written about on the podcast, I, you know, give you guys a shout out, you know, because I acknowledge that you are a great source. And you're a great source for everyone. And, you know, Krasenstein is another one. I think you guys toss things back and forth a lot, but they're always on top of it and faster than we are. Just based on, you know, my personal life and my business life, sometimes a week goes by and I'm like, I haven't even been on BitClout. And I may have been working on things about BitClout, but I'm like, I haven't even gone on the platform. I've been too busy. And like, I got to catch up. And, you know, summertime is a really bad time for all of us. So, and I've also noticed that, you know, like I put out probably every other day a podcast in the first month.
Wow.
And I was passionate and excited and I really was basically like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to just really charge ahead. And then I've kind of gone through more of a case of it's harder to get people to be on the podcast. And I think that's two things. One is I think there's a portion of people who have kind of fallen away, whereas in the early days, it was easier to get people to jump in and want to do a podcast.
Right.
But then I think the ones who have remained, because I'm a little more selective because of my time, I'm like, okay, I'm going to just try to grab these certain people I'm really interested in speaking with. But they're busy and they're busy trying to do things for BitClout and on BitClout. And so it's become a challenge. And like even we had to reschedule because you're worn out, you know, and wanted to be fresh for this episode. And, you know, for the, you know, listeners' benefit, we were going to try to do this last week and you were like, I just need to push it off a little bit. And I'm cool with that. But, and I have several, and I actually went through about 2 weeks where I didn't do any episodes because there were just 2 or 3 people that I had in mind. I want to speak to these people. And it's just, I got it locked in my brain. Like, these are the people I'm going to talk to next. And they were like, yeah, I'll do it. And then a week later, they're like, I am just too busy. We're trying to get this project done for BitClout. And can we push this off a few weeks? And so I kind of like wait for a few weeks, waiting for these people. But tells me that they're just really trying to forge ahead and stay true to their deadlines. And so there's been that dynamic, but nevertheless, it's still working out for me. So now the reason that I really pursued trying to talk to you was about this special edition you did last week, where you, as I clouded about it, like you said, what all of it is on, I think, everyone's mind. And you brought a lot of context to, you're just asking the questions and sort of demanding some transparency. Right. I still don't believe that that's been forthcoming. And I even think I read, and I think your subsequent drop from you guys that Diamond Hands was, I don't know. It just looked to me like it was bullshit, where he's saying, there was no sell wall, or buy wall. I watched that thing sit at $100.01 and $100 for 3 cents for like weeks. I'm like, anybody who can't see that this is completely fake is fooling themselves.
Right.
And, and so I think I was probably one of the earlier people who started calling that out on, in a clout, saying, does this look like manipulation to you? A few people would respond saying, yeah, I agree. But then I would hear other people say, oh no, the price is still staying above 100. I'm like, no, it's not. I'd rather it be $15 and be real than be $200 and be fake. Right. That's the only way it can be. So that, among other things. So why don't you take like your top 3 things from that sort of diatribe you did, where you were just calling it out, and just tell me what was on your mind and what, and kind of guide the listeners through that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think, there's a number of things that I think we could definitely use a lot more transparency on. And I know that, we're starting to slowly get more insight into the near-term roadmap, and we're starting to get more communication from the core team. So I do think some of this stuff will improve in the coming weeks. And as a result, I think it's almost even more important that we just continue to make the stuff that's most important to us, keep it front and center, so that as they start to interact with the community a little bit more, we don't lose sight of those things. There's a new account, Fast Freddy, who is kind of starting to become like a mouthpiece for the core team. Like, he's in direct contact with them, and he is slowly dripping out information that he knows about what their plans are, and when he can answer questions that the community has about things like, when's the like redesign of bitclout.com coming? He's like, okay, it'll be weeks, not months. So it's not the most specific information ever, but there is starting to be some more helpful like content that's dripping out from them. But, to go back to the core of what I think, if I could have 3 questions answered, I'd say one's exactly as you said. We don't really know why or how the price just kind of levitated at $100 for probably 6 weeks, I think it was, at the end of the day. Diamond Hands did say that he himself was buying a lot of clout at $100, because I think he said something to the effect of like, he thought that was a good price for clout. So we know that he was himself personally providing some price support there, but it did seem like there was a pretty consistent wall of buy orders at the $100 price point on blockchain.com for those weeks. So,
but do you believe that?
Do I believe that he was buying some personally? Sure.
Well, I believe he was buying it, but
I don't.
Who buys anything at a price because they think, oh, well, it's a good price. Ultimately, it's about the good price is the best price.
Right.
And I literally have not bought any because I personally think it's going to go down. And
sure,
I welcome that. I want it to go way down because I think it's going to go way up someday. And I look at Bitcoin the same way. So I just don't trust that. I think it's just trying to satisfy, demands from people like yourselves to say, hey, we want answers. And that was a half-ass answer, in my opinion. It was.
Yeah, I agree with you that we definitely didn't get the full picture there. And I think more so than whatever his motivation is, like beyond the fact that you're right, he probably didn't necessarily think that that was a good price. Like he was probably just trying to provide some personal support to the price. My bigger question is who else was providing support? Because he says he doesn't know, but we all can see from the way that the order book was for a month that clearly there were a lot of other large buyers at 100. And, Diamond Hands says that wasn't coming from the Treasury or from anyone he knew, but who was it? Was it like a certain venture capital firm that was just happy to accumulate as much cloud as they could at $100 per coin? Like that's also not super likely given what you just laid out about how we can all see now that retroactively, like the true market price of cloud is probably closer to $50 or $60 where it is now that all that price support has been removed. And the other question that remains is like, why did it all change so much? I guess it was a week ago from today. Like if there wasn't a coordinated effort from a few different parties to buy a bunch of cloud at 100, like why did it all just like change all of a sudden a week ago? From one moment to the next, it's like, okay, buy orders are there. Okay, buy orders aren't there anymore. Like something happened.
Yeah. And I just feel like that post was just kind of okay, well, I'm answering your question and that's all we're going to get. And I think realistically, that is all we're going to get unless there's an investigation by some regulator or something. Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if there's a legal regulatory issue. Like if people want, hypothetically, if BitCloud had wanted to buy a bunch of clout with their treasury funds at that price, like I don't think there's inherently like anything that's stopping them from doing that. But I do agree with you that like there's so much happening that in 2 weeks from now, I'm not sure how many people are still going to be asking that question because it'll have been so long.
Well, you also asked
hopefully
the
podcasts
question.
Like this help.
Yeah, well, perhaps. But I mean, you asked the question, in tandem with that to say, were there some insider deals with advanced knowledge of that sudden, just precipitous drop?
Yeah, and it's possible that there were some folks that sold a week ago today, and there's a few different ways that scenario could have played out. It could have been that because they all sold, like people that were buying, whoever the people buying at 100 might have seen those big sells and be like, oh shit, I'm going to stop buying at 100. That's one possibility. It's possible that, maybe somehow folks heard that Diamond Hands was going to stop buying at 100, or a few of these parties were going to stop buying at 100. And like, maybe they weren't even supposed to hear, but because they heard, they sold before that happened. And so they got out at a good price. Or the worst case scenario is that like they were actually informed by a variety of parties that, or whoever was buying at 100, that they wouldn't be buying at 100 more, and it was more coordinated than any of us would like it to have been. So there's a full spectrum of the way that could have gone down. But, I just hope that it's more of option 1 or option 2 than option 3, obviously. Because if it is option 3, then you start to wade into actual market manipulation and insider trading dynamics where like people that like you could conceivably see a contingent of other people on BitClout coming together and saying, hey, we're going to like file a class action lawsuit because, this materially harmed our investments, and folks were acting on inside information about a market that wasn't available to everyone. So I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how these things work. I don't know if that would actually be possible. And I certainly wouldn't pursue legal action personally. But, that if there were information that made it seem like that scenario 3 that I outlined was more likely than not, then that would be, that's not a good way to interact in any marketplace.
Sure. Sure. And I just know during that time when it was stuck at 100, I just had to throw my hands up and go, okay, this thing was born out of enormous VC backing, insider deals. You asked the question about what was the origin, what was the transactions that took place for some of these first minted coins, who got them, all these things. So I had to just resolve myself to that. That's just the same dynamic at play. There's this big money machine behind this thing, this group of good old boy VCs that are saying, here's the plan. We're going to go to this one exchange. We're going to, inflate the price. We're going to, support the price with our own money or whatever. just because we want it to look better than it is. And that really didn't give me a lot of faith. I think that people will have faith in it if it goes down naturally. Like I've heard, I think I saw Krasenstein saying, well, now it's set at 50 on the platform. I don't know where they get that information.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I asked the question in a post, say, if this is true, we're no better off than we were at 100, because that doesn't breed trust in a free market.
Right.
And so that's what I look forward to, is this free float, and let it fall apart for a while. That's when because I'm waiting. I'd love to buy some clout, and I wanted to buy some when it was 180, and I didn't do it because I thought, well, maybe it'll go to 150 when it goes to the exchange, or maybe 100. But in watching what's happened, I'm like, well, doggone, it's still inflated. So I'll look for maybe another bottom, but that concerns me, because I really feel like it's going to hit Coinbase, and I think it'll go down when it goes to Coinbase.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about Coinbase is exactly what you're asking for is going to happen. Like, I don't think that at that point there'll be sufficient liquidity where there aren't really market operations that could materially change the price as much as was possible when it was just blockchain. So like, that's going to be free market doing whatever it wants to. Mm-hmm. And, back to the VC point you made, I have no idea. Like, and I'm not trying to be too conspiratorial. Like, I highly doubt that most of the VC backers are like really doing much to coordinate price action. Like, they have super long time horizons. Like, they probably don't give a shit if it goes from $60 to 30 right now. The thing on that front that I would just like to see is, I would just like to know, it'd be awesome to have like a full database of, these are all the different wallets that own this much percentage of the total cloud supply. Because with other projects, like, that's possible. With Bitcoin, you can look at the entire supply of Bitcoins out there in the world and determine like what the most concentrated wallets are. And like, that's an important analysis to be able to do just from like a network centralization perspective. But right now, I don't know the technicals of it that much, but I know that folks like Tyne have asked for this information too. They're like, when can we see the transactions in the Genesis block that happened between like November 2019 and March 2020? Like, that's just another transparency thing that I think we'll get it at some point. I think in good faith, like, all that information will come out and we'll be able to see like, this wallet owns 1 million clout and that's 10% of total supply or whatever, but we're still waiting. So yeah. And a lot of this stuff just comes back to like, I think that information could all be made transparent, and I'm confident, or hopeful at least, that we'll get there. But the faster that we can get there, the more trust that we'll be able to build, and the more momentum that we'll be able to build more quickly.
Yeah. And I think to some degree, just you and I have both seen crypto projects with probably less transparency and even more craziness go through the roof.
Yeah.
In general, I think a lot of people just don't care. They're just looking to turn that profit.
Right.
So, and I like this supply cap that's now in place.
Right.
I like, one of the first things that turned me on about this was the idea that the price would double for every 1 million clout sold, which that's now, history. But right. I like that. I like those, tokenomics, so to speak. So I think people will just be looking forward to that. And so I do think that there's going to come a time, and this is not financial advice, but it's just what I think. It's going to go down. It's going to find some, what's the word I'm looking for? This
support.
Support, yeah. And then cool thing is it'll be on Coinbase, and it'll be probably, if there is this gas on the fire, and maybe we see a lot of people looking at those tokenomics and going, wait a minute, there's lots of ways that this gets burned over time, even just sort of indirectly. I think account after account after account after account, goes into the billions, and there's these little, there's BitClout dust that just gets locked forever in accounts that never do anything.
Right.
And then there's other ways that I think it gets burned. And then so that can, when we're already dealing with what's our tokenomics now? 10.5 million or something like that?
10.8 will be the cap.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. And I do believe that BitClout is going to be like, it has the potential to be like the new Web3, where we see BitClout websites riding on the rails of that you don't realize are BitClout websites. Like
Right.
you pointed one, you guys pointed out one, and I think in your most recent Bits Today, and it was called, it's a new project you profiled, an app about NFTs. What was the name?
Oh, Supernovas, maybe? Polygram?
Yeah.
A couple different new projects.
The Supernova. And when I looked at that screenshot you did of it, I was like, this just looks like another website, but it's an e-commerce type of website.
Right.
Where people can transact in clout. So I have a vision for, it's not my vision, but I believe in the vision that it can be that someday, where people are buying and selling with clout on other websites that are completely unrelated to BitClout, so to speak, as a community. And, so when I look at things like Shopify, which is, going to kick Amazon's butt potentially with some of the things they're doing. I mean, who knows who win that battle, but what I'm saying is they have a lot of clout, so to speak, they've got power that they can leverage with their massive user base.
Right.
Well, it should say something to you that the CEO of that company is on BitClout.
Right.
And I look at that and go, people like that don't do this just for the hell of it. They've got a vision for how this could, maybe we can buy and sell in Shopify stores or run Shopify stores on BitClout. So it's just all kinds of things. So all of that comes back to the tokenomics of scarcity. And when you only have a limited supply of 10.5 million or so, factor in that a big portion of that is under lock and key, so to speak. So there's not a big real circulating supply. That scarcity on an exchange like Coinbase could really be cool.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, I think there's all kinds of different scenarios where BitClout does well in the future. And it doesn't have to be, like the single Web3 player. Like there's going to be a vibrant ecosystem of all kinds of platforms that do well. But like, we've got like 5,000 daily active users right now.
Nothing.
A $500 million market cap. If this thing goes even to 500,000 daily active users in the long term, which wouldn't be crazy from a social network perspective, like you could see a compelling case for a much higher market cap. So, I'm not that interested in making specific projections or anything like that. That's not my game right now. But I just think for folks like yourself and myself, like we've seen something in the social network. There's good people here. There's interesting people here. There's really smart people here. I've made some great connections. We've seen something in the dynamics of the way that you can use clout, the currency. That's fun. Like integrating that into a social network and being able to send someone a penny or $5 on a post that I really like it's a great experience. And so there's something there too. And, we've also seen something clearly in a lot of the other things that BitClout offers, like NFTs, having a semblance of a relationship with like the team that's building it. Like I've been able to interact with some of the core team a little bit on the platform. Like that's a fun experience too. Just being like, oh, these are the people that are building it. Like, and they actually read some of the shit that I write. Like it's not. So
what's your impression? What's your impression of them as just, people? I know they're hardworking, hustling, great developers, but what's your vibe on that whole deal? Like,
I think that
are they running around with their hair on fire, or are they pretty relaxed? Are they able to have a casual conversation and maybe they go out for a beer at some point in the week?
They seem like cool people to me. I'm sure that they're running around with their hair on fire and not getting a ton of sleep right now, considering the amount of stuff that they're trying to do. And I think it's only like, there's definitely not 10 of them. I feel like there's 5 or 6 of them that are probably working full time, like trying to build a blockchain and a front end and like address community feedback here now again. I think they're definitely more like dev, product, blockchain folks than they are marketing folks. So like they need a lot of help on that front. I would guess like some of their presence on Twitter of like, I'm like, man, I would have written some of these tweets differently, or I'd be more active. Although I do think Diamond Hands does a good job of articulating himself in writing. Like when I read the BitClout FAQ and the BitClout Vision docs, like those are pretty well put together. So, he's a good communicator in written form at the minimum from what I've seen, but they could definitely use help on the marketing hype and PR front.
Well, I guess they've hired a PR firm, and so we can look forward to some press there. To what degree do you know this Fast Freddy guy is involved in that, or is he just a, spokesman? Is he like the White House press secretary?
I'm not exactly sure. I know that he works directly with the team, and I think he's gonna try to be. What I understand is that he'll be a liaison for like trying to interact with the community more, and like when Diamond Hands can't be responding to comments or answering simple questions, like at least like the low hanging, at the bare minimum, like the low hanging fruit stuff, where like if you read the FAQ, there'd be like you could find an answer to it. Like being able to spread more of that information and make sure that you know
what's
that
his
kind of stuff is taken care
what's
of.
his history? Like, does he have a history of this type of thing, or?
I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, no, I don't really know.
Yeah. Yes, interesting. So, all right, we could go on and on, but before we sort of start tapering this off, because I want to talk about the future, but I want to make sure we cover the heart of what your special edition was. Like, what's the other thing that's like just too opaque right now?
Yeah, I mean, the main two things that were too opaque for me were, as we discussed, how the price was supported at $100 for a month. Let's just call it a month. The other thing that's opaque is like everything that happened in the Genesis block and what the distribution of clout is between different wallets. And like, I'd love to know how much different venture capital firms own, because that has impacts on, the total centralization of the network and what might happen in 5 years when their lockup periods come up. Those were the main two things. One other point that I brought up that I find to not always be the most helpful thing about BitClout is like how steep the bonding curves that govern creator coins are. There's just so much money to be made in the first like $1,000 of investing in any creator coin, and then it plateaus very quickly. Like if you buy the first 5 coins in an account and then someone else puts another like $200 into it or something like that, you've already doubled your money. Whereas if there's already 100 coins that exist for an account, like trying to double your investment would take thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of investment. So there's just some interesting, kind of skewed financial incentives to be really early in an account and to create new accounts, which I think is a behavior that we've all observed anecdotally. Like everyone always is excited to spin up a new account for a new project because it's just a good way to make money. And so I just wish that there were other ways that people were excited about making money on BitClout beyond just making new accounts, because at the end of the day, that's not the most productive behavior. Like inevitably some people that invest in the account kind of late are going to lose money. Like it sucks clout away from people that are just using the same account month after month. It means that there's less clout for things like buying NFTs or diamonding posts. Like it just kind of sucks up a lot of the attention and activity on the platform.
Yeah, I agree. And do you think there's a chance it could be reformulated?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they reformulated the bonding curve formula itself. But, maybe there's other things like staking creator coins or swapping creator coins directly, like new functionality that could be introduced that would make people more likely to like invest in like stable creator coins for the long term. Like the reason that it's kind of, if my coin already costs $500 or whatever, like it's going to be hard for folks to get a gain on their investment. But if you introduced functions like, you can now stake NVO coin and earn interest on it, like then people might be more interested in investing for the long term. So I don't exactly know how all those different types of new functionality would work or look, but I reckon that rather than reformulating the bonding curve itself, there'll probably just be some new functionality that people introduce to make it more attractive to hold coins for the long term instead of just pumping them.
What about, I just thought of this, I'm sure I'm not the first, making an NFT of your coin. Like, what if BitClout built that in to where you could take one of your creator coins and say, okay, now I'm creating an NFT with this. Now you can take it and buy it and resell it just like an NFT.
Right.
And I'm going to get a portion of it at whatever rate I've decided. But it just stays as a sort of set coin that I can sell as an NFT. And maybe it's those coins that you own in your creator coin are sequenced, and you can say, I'm going to take my third coin that went into circulation, and I'm going to NFT that one because that one cost me $5.
Interesting. Yeah.
And then I can make money on that coin, or other people can.
Right.
Just thinking out loud here, but there's all kinds of ways. I mean, people fractionalize and tokenize other tokens all the time, and
right.
wrap them. So,
I think wrapping is actually one of the more interesting. Is like, if you could make a wrapped NVO coin that you can then stake in a liquidity pool on the Ethereum blockchain or Binance or whatever, or swap for, like, if you could buy an NVO coin and then a month later, if instead of just selling it on BitClout, like you swap it for, I don't know, you want Solana, you go to PancakeSwap or Uniswap and you get your other cryptocurrency. Like suddenly you have a more vibrant market and more interesting ways to use your creator coins, at least your creator coin.
Yeah, but it needs to be done on BitClout for low fees.
Yeah, I agree. Like, we're talking about doing it on other chains now. Like ultimately it should just be done on the BitClout blockchain too.
Yeah. All right. So now let's transition to the future, because we live in a world where we're, talking about BitClout with 3,000 to 5,000 daily active users, which is absolutely nothing in context of what the possibilities are. And I'm just a meager podcaster with the handle BitClout Podcast.
Good handle.
I'll admit it's prime real estate, but
right.
And you guys are first movers in the sort of daily chronicle of what's happening in BitClout, and that's awesome. Are you going to have a CNN style newsroom in 5 years when you're having to have a 100-person team scouring 10,000 nodes looking for?
Yeah, the multi-node future is definitely scary because I can barely keep up with what's going on right now at 5,000 users and like 5 to 10 main nodes that people use. I think if Bits Today continued to be really on top of everything happening on BitClout, we'd probably need like a reporter for every 5 to 10 nodes. So if there's 500 nodes a year from now, that, you do the math, that's 100 people writing about those nodes. But it's interesting. Like I think right now we try to cover like almost everything that's really important that happens in any given day. Like in the future, I could see us just not being able to do that. Like if you tried to cover everything that was happening on Reddit, trying to cover every subreddit, like that would be impossible. So, maybe something that we would do that happens on things like Discord channels already is like delegate authority to use like to writers that we trust or talented folks that we know, like delegate kind of the authority to act as a Bits Today kind of satellite within those communities and say, hey, I'm a representative of Bits Today, but I'm also a member of this community. Like I write the daily roundup for what happened on this node or this subreddit equivalent. And so then you become more of like a Barstool Sports where you have all kinds of different products that ladder up loosely to the Bits Today umbrella, but they don't even have to be called Bits Today. Like you could just have if you had a BitClout podcast node in the future for yourself, you might have a writer who pops in for 5 hours a week to do like a weekly recap of your stuff in written form. And that could be somehow loosely affiliated with Bits Today. I don't know what all the financial incentives and the relationship would look like, but that could be cool.
Yeah.
Or we'll also have like a master aggregator node where we just like flag stuff from different nodes that we think is cool and just like push it to our node.
And then you'll have to have AI do a lot of the writing and procurement.
Yeah, at least the curation for sure. As a writer, I'm hopeful that my skill set won't be replaceable by AI for another 5 to 10 years at least, but I'm sure it'll happen. But maybe I still have a little bit of an edge for now. Well,
the style you guys write in is very hip and cutting edge. Like I don't know that machines can pick that up very quickly. But you and I both know that they're, these machines are pretty amazing.
Yeah, they'll do it eventually for sure.
So, I mean, I don't know how we keep track going forward of what's going on. And, I think back to when I first started covering crypto, in 2018, which I felt like I was late to the game, but over the years I've realized that most of my friends still don't know anything about it. But there was so much less to talk about in 2018. There was, the bubble that had just happened, this, alleged crash. But now when every day I wake up and start reading crypto news, and it's mind boggling. There are so many projects, major projects launching every single day that, so I think of like you guys as like the potential Cointelegraph of BitClout. And that's a heave ho, that operation, so like when I was in Miami, I spent some time with now he's an editor at large. He was their former, chief editor, and he was just burnt out. Literally. And he's like, I'm so tired. I got so tired of obviously he was dealing with a 24/7 global operation and news desk, so to speak. And he's like, I would go to bed and wake up and some writer in another country would write something that just blew things up, and they completely said the wrong thing. And it was like a firestorm. And I'm like, I knew nothing about it. And I wake up and have to deal with this fallout. And then he's like, and then there's the death threats. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? He's like, oh my God, some of these, fanboys, so to speak, these user groups are just relentless. These people that are like diehard coin, like Doge Army or whatever.
Right.
And I was like, what's the worst ones? And I thought he was going to say Ripple. And he's like, no, it's Cardano. I'm like, are you serious? He's like, oh yeah, that crowd, they just hound us. Hey, I like Cardano and I like Charles Hoskinson, but I was shocked to hear that. But that passion is so, vehement that people are just like, they can't stand if you don't say the right thing about their coin. What's going to happen? What's going to happen when you, as a team, are writing about, maybe it's a creator coin that has a $4 million fan base and they're rabid fans, and if you say something averse, what do you have to look forward to there?
Yeah, well, maybe I need to continue to dig deeper into anonymity and just stay NVO. Like right now, it wouldn't be too hard for you to figure out who I am in real life, but maybe I need to wade deeper into anonymity. No, I don't know. I think what you raise, the point you raise is important because we've already seen it with people that are adamant that BitClout is a scam. Like once folks start riffing on that tangent, it's like impossible to convince them otherwise. So I just want to make sure that if I could contribute something to the community, it'd be that we also be careful and not become those same folks ourselves. Like there's a lot of other decentralized social networks that are popping up out there. Some of them probably have really good ideas. Like just because we all started on BitClout doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to learn things from Rally and other places and like not be dogmatic that BitClout is the best thing that ever happened to mankind, because it definitely isn't yet. So, that's the broader point that I think you raised that's important, is like, let's continue to push for transparency and ask hard questions and be respectful when other people ask hard questions of us. Like there were times when we've published things that in retrospect we could have done a better job doing diligence on, or that didn't paint other creators as in a charitable light and that probably weren't 100% fair. And, that we take responsibility for that. And there's lots of improving that we can do too. So we're not gospel or anything like that either. I think as long as we all stay open and admit that, especially on a platform where things are moving as fast as they are, like everyone from the core team down is making mistakes, then we can also build a better future together.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just going to be pretty remarkable to watch if there are millions of users. It's just, there's got to be factionality coming, and that's a given. The bigger it gets, the more, and we want it to be factional, so to speak, in a way that communities and countries can have their own nodes that are irrespective of the rest of the BitClout universe,
right? Where
they have their communities, right. But with that comes, factions within factions that we've all witnessed with, Twitter and the like. So yeah, it's part of why I wanted to do this podcast, is to chronicle that evolution, good and bad.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's so cool to have folks like yourself who are, who's going to be in a better position to, if BitClout blows up in 5 years in a good way, like who's going to be in a better position to write the BitClout book, like folks like yourself and myself, we can put our heads together and be like, we've got this chronicle of early adoption and what it all looked like. We'll go write the movie or the screenplay or the book or whatever.
Well, I plan on watching it from my island.
There you go. Yeah.
I'll watch what you make.
That wouldn't be a bad outcome. But
no, I mean, it's just you start looking at how exhausting that can be. I was like, wow, man, it's already too big to cover comprehensively.
Right. Yeah, it'd be a funny story though. Like I wonder.
The Raj polls and all those types of things, and
the first Miami meetup.
yeah,
all good stuff.
Yeah, and I remember watching ASG doing his purple smoke thing. And I thought that's pretty cool. Like he must be a heavy hitter, man. He's doing a photo shoot right here in front of the restaurant. And then I realized later he was asked to do it, but he did a good job of it.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And I think we'll all look back and realize, wow, the first big meetup was like right in the heart of Little Haiti. And, like I went 2 blocks away, or I drove through there earlier in the day to see where I could park. And I realized quickly I'm not parking anywhere near here because there were drug deals going down all over the place.
Yeah. Our Uber driver didn't want to drop us off. He's like, this is not a good area for y'all.
Yeah.
He's looking at like 3 white guys and 1 white girl. He's like, y'all are going to get fucking torn apart out here. But we made it.
But it was fun. And I got out of there before the sun went down.
Right. Went back to better parts of town.
Yeah, had a nice dinner by the beach with other people. But I honestly I wish I'd stuck around a little longer because I think some fun things that went on, but had to move on to another event. Man, I'm glad we did this, and look for ways to collaborate in the future. And I need to get ASG on here too sometime. We talked about it way back when and just never did. And I know you guys are super busy. But I'm appreciative of all the work you guys do, and I'll try to make sure I call out attention to things that I've gleaned from what I've learned from you. So
yeah,
I'll miss that occasionally, and I'll screw it up. But I'm asking forgiveness in the future. But anyone who listens to my podcast knows I'm big fans of you guys.
Appreciate it. Well, love what you're doing here too, and can't wait to listen to future episodes. And I'm sure ASG would be happy to jump on and do one, but I'm excited to hear about all the other folks that you have on too. It's always good to discover new people that way.
Yeah, it is. It's good for me, especially. All right, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Bye now.